All right, so the elusive logo and logo design. Every single brand that you're seeing has some form of a logo. Some fantastic, some super iconic, some not so great. This video is gonna be focused on how do we talk about the principles and things to consider when you're designing a logo. Whether you're an independent freelancer or you're an established designer, or you're just a company that's thinking about redesigning your logo. So we're gonna talk about all the different principles and things to consider to make sure that you get it right, you separate yourself in the sea of sameness, and make sure that you stand out in a good way. So who am I? Brian Sena. I'm the founder and principal of EverWonder, full-scale marketing agency. We focus on branding, storytelling, and lead generation. And a little bit about our credibility is almost every brand that we work with, one of our key pillars and offering is around brand identity. We really want to make sure that whether you are aspiring and out just getting started, you have a very solid logo, or if you're a challenger brand that we can help improve and elevate, or if you're an established business with a logo that you love, then how do we surround that with the right brand elements that can build on that? And so first thing you should consider when you think about logo design is who do you want to be matched with? Who are you going to be surrounded? We typically do an exercise to make sure that we look at all the different competitors in a given space to make sure that what you're designing is not completely alien to what's happening. So a good exercise that I would find is companies like, and you could just Google search that very easily. You could click on images for Google Image, and then you could just map out and start to understand some of these competitors. What I do to ultimately get into a rabbit hole as well is I'll just look at best logo design in insurance, best logo design in healthcare. And you could click images and start finding out all the various logos that are there and then plot those, start to look at it. And then put your logo if it exists in the center or leave a nice open space for yourself. Once you get a homogeneous structure of what that looks like, now you can start making decisions on whether or not you want to be someone who is kind of blending in with the crowd or super stand out and bold, because it does make sense to do both. And the next thing to consider is, do you want to be creating a glyph or an icon with your brand, or do you want to just be what's called a logo type, so just be a word mark? When you think of Nike, you can think of Nike being in that forward motion italicized, but you also have the swoosh. The swoosh is that brand icon that's going to be on shoes, shirts, apparel, whatever it is. And oftentimes that's actually by itself. That's how iconic it is. But depending on what you are, you also might have, Google has the logo type became the icon, where you have the colors layered into Google. So you're layering in all the colors to that specific logo type. So second thing to consider is, do you want an icon or a logo type or both? Because that gives you a completely different place to start. Third thing to consider is, are we going to focus on sketching, drawing, things like that? Or do we want to make sure that we find an example that we want to replicate? Next thing that you're going to go into is understand and give yourself permission the fact that all art is theft. It's now 2023. We're at a point in our lives where almost everything from a design perspective has been done in some iteration. Good luck if you're going to find out, like buying a domain name or naming a product, etc. Almost everything has been done in some iteration. So don't be so hard on yourself if there is something else out in the wild, maybe in another industry, that while you're sketching or you're thinking about, your logo looks similar to. That's okay, as long as you find your own differentiator. So consider the fact that you got to give yourself some grace when you're designing. Next thing to do, which I always like to do, is you're writing words that come to mind that you associate with a given brand. So if you're thinking about, the word Apple, right? Yeah, it's very basic that they have a black and white apple that they've used as a logo mark. They built a brand around their why, they built a brand around all of that stuff. But the reality is, if you were to associate all the words that you wrote down with Apple, would you necessarily draw an apple as their icon if you were to redesign them today? Probably not. So think about that and just start writing down all the words that come to mind. I call those word association exercises. Word association exercises give you an ability to tap into parts of your brain that maybe you're preconditioned to think of, but also might spark other creativity. When you take that preconditioned notion, you then can develop something called a mind map. A mind map is going to allow you to take words and then bracket those out. Once you have that, you could then, using those words, taking something like thesaurus.com or even use ChatGPT to use AI to take those words and then think of common visuals that are used specifically into that. So now you could take common visuals that connect and say, okay, now if a word association is fast, what can that look like? Is that a monorail? Is that a lightning bolt? Is that a tornado? What are the things that come to mind for these things that can give you a sense of logo design? So if you're thinking about a sports team like the Arizona Cardinals, yeah, they use a cardinal as their main icon. That makes perfect sense. But the cardinal is designed in such a way where it has exaggerated elements to look a bit more aggressive, or it has exaggerated elements so you can focus more on the forward motion of the bird. So it's not just what you're going to design, it's also what other things I want to accentuate. That happens when you write the words that make sense. Next thing to consider is, how professional do you want to be and how professional do you want to look? Because if you're an energy drink, you want something that's going to be bold and in your face and also have a lot of properties that can stir up emotion. You think about what Red Bull's logo is. It's not a simple logo. It's two major big Red Bulls clapping together, with this yellow undertone, right? It's competitive, it's in your face, it's energetic, it's an energy drink. And there's a reason why they haven't changed it since the inception of the company. You'll see slight evolutions, but as they thought about that, when you think about a Red Bull that's also a bit of an irony because bulls, when they see red, they don't like it, they go crazy. So another reason why they actually call it Red Bull is when you think of those individuals saying Toro, bulls don't like the color red. And so what's gonna happen if they see that, they're gonna get elevated. All of those things go into the brand decision, that goes into the brainstorming, the creativity. So another thing to consider on the list is, what do I want to evoke when someone sees this? And just a quick side note, if you're liking what you're hearing and you're at a point, so you can be the bull that doesn't see red and doesn't get angry and doesn't get frustrated in the process, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, give us a like. We're gonna be constantly coming with tips, tricks, different things to consider when you're going through logo design, etc. This is something you can count on over and over again. Really appreciate the support. Another thing to consider is, if you are designing a logo for your own personal brand, you are the client. If you're designing for a business or for an agency, you have to consider the fact that someone else is going to be seeing this logo. There has to be a process that goes into this, and that someone else is going to evaluate your thinking, the sketches that come to play, the preparation, all the thought processes. It doesn't matter what you're charging. It doesn't matter how much credibility you have. When someone thinks that they're designing a logo, they immediately think of the very top tier, right? Some logos have cost $4 to $5 million just for the logo mark because they're seen all throughout the world. Some of the best independent design agencies, so Pentagram is still an independent design studio. They design logos, they designed the Slack logo, that was a $1.5 million project. It's a lot of money. And so you have to consider the fact that you're going to be presenting this to an audience. Bring in the theatrical notion of why you did what you did. If the logo doesn't speak for itself, you have a little bit of a problem, but the other side of it is you have to sell in what someone needs to see. And I'll give you an example. If you think of some of the biggest iconic brands in the world, they don't have great logos and icons. Someone sold in that vision, and then it just developed over time, and they built a big enough audience to say, well, we have to keep this now because we have equity. You're in a unique position if you're designing a new logo or evolving. Think about the theatrical nature of the fact that you need to own and sell your work. As a designer, I often say, if you can't sell your work, it's not worth anything, right? The greatest artists of all time found ways to monetize the work that they do. They found a way to be able to sell the vision. And yes, the other side of it pays itself off because now you're gonna connect with an audience that's expecting something and they're gonna feel what they feel. That is the process of art. But the next consideration is present your work in a way that tells a compelling story. You're effectively the director in your own film. If you're going out, understand what someone is going to respond with and understand what someone's going to connect with, and then be prepared for feedback. So you might love and you might have a front runner or a leading horse, but if you're gonna show a piece of creative that you don't wanna get selected, there's a chance that that can get selected because it might connect with someone else's conditioning. So any work that you show, be prepared that if it's selected, you're gonna have to live with that. So unless you fully believe in that, or you could present it in a way with full confidence, don't show it. Sometimes it's better to show 2 concepts rather than 4 if you're not happy with the other 2. We run into this all the time. With Realize It, we presented 4 final concepts to the team. Now, we had our favorites, but anything that we presented to them, we were confident that if they picked it, we would be happy with the outcome. Now, that being said, if I could go back in time, I probably would have removed 1 from the mix, but that 1 was specifically what they asked for. And another thing to consider is, despite you wanting to have a good relationship with your client, there is a moment in time where you're not going to want to design exactly what's asked of the brief, but you have to recognize that they are signing the paycheck. They are the ones signing and paying the invoice. You have to understand that it's ultimately their call, and if you can't help them be the shaman or be their shaman to take them to what you believe is best for the brand, well then you're failing, not them. And so with Realize It, we saw it, with Westhill we saw it, every concept we presented, they were very different. But if anything got selected, we were confident that the 4 concepts we brought forward were all ones that we'd be happy with that they selected. And the last thing to consider among all this is, you've gotten to a point now where you've looked at all the different competitors that are in the market. You find that you've gotten into the mix, the client's happy, you're happy. You have something that's special. The other thing to remember is that this process is iterative. And what I mean by that is that the logo direction and logo concept that's selected doesn't necessarily mean that that's gonna be the winning one in the end. So it's iterative. And you have to tell a client that as well, because if a client is expecting their perfect logo to the world to go out, that's not gonna be the process. The idea of creative is you're gonna sculpt, very similar to how a statue just continues to sculpt and wither this down into a perfect statue. You need to get the concept layered in first and be prepared to show the client. If you show the client in black and white, now they're not considering color in their evaluation. So if you use black and white first, then you could layer in color next. But in addition to that, you want to be able to show it in different applications. One of the biggest things that we found as a success is if you show that logo in context on a billboard, on the side of a bus, on a stanchion, in a digital ad, if you show them what that looks like, they can understand very quickly that maybe this doesn't work the way we think it's going to. Because at the end of the day, if you're building a sports apparel brand and it's gonna have to live on jerseys, on hats, in stadiums, blown up massively, you have to show what that client's gonna look like, because it might look great when it's just the icon on a helmet, but how does it look when it's in full, on letterheads, etc.? The last thing to consider is that it's iterative. Give yourself grace, give clients grace, make sure they're prepared that as you go through it, there is going to be this process of kind of whittling down and smoothing it out. So as mentioned in the middle of this video, if you like the content, if it added any value to you, shoot us a like, give us a subscribe, but also drop your questions in the comments. If you're struggling with a logo design, if you have thoughts, if you've tried all of this stuff and you're still hitting a wall, give us a comment, give us a question, be happy to interact and answer. And also suggest things that you might want to learn more about, because from a marketing perspective, we deal with this stuff every day. We deal with clients of all shapes, all sizes, all different backgrounds, and we're happy to answer these questions. This is one fragment of design. This is just getting started when it comes to marketing.